So this recording will be available in perpetuity forever for anybody else who wants to see it. And yeah, I think for the panelists, or excuse me, for the attendees, I think the chat is disabled, but you guys can type something into the Q&A. And I see Sandra Bondi has figured that out. So we're going to be doing a little discussion, Brandon and I are going to be asking questions, and then we can open things up for everybody else to ask questions if you have them. So Brandon, do you want to get started?
Sure. Yeah, so as Natalie mentioned, we're just going to go over some topics and some questions with the directors and producers of Endgame 2050. That's Bob and Sofia, and they'll be introducing themselves as well. I'm Brandon Burr. I serve as the Director of Food Policy for Animal Wellness Action. And after watching this film, Endgame 2050, I just felt like this is a film that everyone needs to see and not only watch, but have a discussion about. So, so grateful for all of our attendees, and thank you so much for joining us to have this discussion. I'm very grateful that we could get Sofia and Bob on tonight. So thank you so much. Natalie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Natalie Ahwesh. I am Vice President of Humane Action Pittsburgh, and I also work very closely with Animal Wellness Action and Brandon. So when he suggested that we have Endgame 2050 as our first movie panel discussion, I definitely jumped at the chance because I think this is, like Brandon said, a really important film. So really excited to get into the nitty-gritty with Bob and Sofia. So Sofia, I'm going to pass the baton to you if you want to just give everybody an introduction.
Sure. My name is Sofia Pineda. I am from Guadalajara, Mexico. I'm a physician in Houston. That's my day job. And I'm also, I guess I consider myself an activist in my other time. I work part-time as a physician, and I do activism for the environment and for animals. And I had wanted to do a film for quite some time, and so I'm the director for the film Endgame 2050. So I'm very grateful that I was invited to this panel. So thank you, Natalie and Brandon.
Bob, you're up.
Okay, yeah, I'm Bob Rapfogel, and I also, here in Houston, I'm a lawyer, day job, and certainly has been, you know, kind of relatively as part-time as I could make it, and, you know, these last number of years to work on the film. So I'm the other producer of the film that Endgame 2050. And Sofia and I have been working on, you know, just raising awareness of issues around animals, around environmental topics. And we've been doing that, I guess, since maybe 2015 or 2016. And then the bulk of that, that time over the last 3 years was focused on the film. So we're glad that it's out and people can see it, and really appreciate you guys organizing this discussion so that we can, you know, talk about the film and talk about the topics in it. So thank you so much for having us.
Well, let's get right into it then. I'm really curious, what inspired you guys to make this film?
Sofia?
You know, we had been working on like shorter content through our nonprofit Meet Your Future, and every time I made a small video, I felt like I couldn't quite communicate everything I wanted to communicate. Like I always kept making the videos longer and longer, and I was like, no, it's just like I need to do like a longer film that I can really like say everything I want to say, you know, to convey the severity and convey how these things interact. And so I guess that was one of the drivers. And then another driver, I think, was a little bit of frustration with sometimes, you know, when you're a medical student, you kind of idealize your medical career. And then after medical school, I did my residency and I was working. And I think at the time I was feeling sometimes a little bit frustrated. So I also wanted that as a kind of as an outlet to do something that I was just very passionate about, and if that makes any sense.
Makes perfect sense.
And I know you're in the medical field, so sometimes you have frustrations as well, so you can understand.
Yeah, Sophia, actually, you and I have similar paths. That's fantastic. And then Natalie, you also had another question.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, well, myself included, but everybody I spoke to who watched this film, everybody just couldn't stop talking about the 15-minute futuristic prediction approach that you guys took, because it was so unique and something that I know I haven't seen in any other documentaries. So why did you decide to do that? Why did you take that approach?
That was just a desperate approach to make something, to try to make something like entertaining, watchable. So in the past, when we made short videos, it was always kind of like dry, and I always thought the information was so compelling, but then I feel like people would be just like yawn, like not interesting, you know? So I thought to myself, you know, I'm from Mexico, and I thought to myself, what do people in Mexico like watch? And I thought, well, they like to watch like soap operas, like telenovelas, you know? And I thought, well, maybe if I do like a really short like telenovela in the beginning and then just spread it out through the film, maybe that will be interesting to people. So it was just like a desperate approach to try to make it like watchable and entertaining.
Great, yeah. Maybe that makes sense. Thanks, Sophia. And then talking about the opening of the film and how the first futuristic news segment covers the methane eruption in Alaska and how this threat of escaping methane from frozen surfaces is going to accelerate climate change. And then the futuristic news segment also covered the fish and phytoplankton populations projected to disappear, which of course is going to disrupt food chains in the oceans. And then I also liked how you captured this aspect. I believe it was a mental health clinic they were at?
It was a psychiatric hospital. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so being that it was at the psychiatric hospital, the beginning of the film captures how these changes on our planet that are projected in the next 30 years and this mass extinction, it's going to have an effect on humans' mental health. And I was just wondering, was that an intention of yours to capture that?
And I'm sorry, Bob, I keep like replying to these questions, but I know these are, you know, you'll get all the next one.
No, this is all you.
You know what, Brandon? It's funny because actually, you know, I've worked in many psychiatric hospitals through my career, and I didn't really think of it as trying to display, you know, the connection between future challenges. You know, we did kind of make that connection, but it was more like when I was thinking about the future, it's funny, but it was more like because I've just spent so much time in psychiatric hospitals, you know, as a physician myself, and just when I envision the future, I just kind of came up with a psychiatric hospital, but initially it wasn't like that thought out of a connection, you know. I was just trying to write up a plot for some story, and it was just what came natural to me, just having spent so much time in them.
Sure, yeah. And of course, the beginning of the film shows the news covering what's actually happening to our planet in the future. And, you know, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but tell me if you agree, you know, we have to question, you know, why isn't any aspect of this sixth mass extinction ever covered by the mainstream media, being that it's happening right now. So I just think that, again, without sounding like a conspiracy theorist, we have to question who funds the media and who pays for the advertisements. And it's the industries that profit off this animal agriculture system. It's big ag and big pharma. So it just makes me wonder and question, why isn't any of this covered on the news today? So I was just wondering, is that something you agree with?
Yeah,
Go ahead, you go first, Bob.
Okay. No, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, I think, you know, of all the issues, like the sixth mass extinction, you know, the fact that it's already underway and there's scientific consensus, you know, measuring the population of wild animals over this, you know, course of the last 50 years. I think the World Living Planet Index report, and maybe again, the name of it a little bit jumbled, came out just last month, that we've lost 68% of wild animal populations on average from 1970 to 2016. It was an updated version of the report from 2018 that we cited in the film. And you'd think it would be the main story, you know, regularly, if not every day. But, you know, I think it's a combination of things. I think, you know, it could be, you know, some sensitivity to advertisers, you know, they could play a part. I don't think there's anything conspiratorial about, you know, kind of recognizing that, you know, news and TV companies make their revenue from advertisers, and if advertisers are driving consumption, and particularly consumption of, you know, in many cases, you know, very unsustainable products, animal based products, as a prime example, you know, that could be, you know, a conflict. I don't know if it's, you know, again, I don't think it's conspiratorial. I think it's just sort of something that may weigh in the minds of kind of the collective groupthink of how these priorities are made and what's reported and how. But it's also just kind of something that I think people just have I don't know, a bit of denialism about. I mean, even people who accept the science, like the degree or the severity of it, I think there's a disconnect. And I know, like Sophia, a report I think on Fox News caught your eye some time ago, where I think the report from either 2016 or maybe it's 2018. There's a report that was published, I believe, in Journal Science, that concluded the sixth mass extinction is already underway, and it actually got some good press. You know, at least maybe not, you know, on the news on TV that people watch as much, but, you know, kind of on the BBC environment websites and the news websites, it actually got a good bit of coverage for, you know, at least a few days. And they picked up on it on this Fox News, you know, one of their broadcast shows, and they were laughing about it. You know, they said, what mass extinction? There's no mass extinction, and their way of, you know, being just, you know, cute about it was to show like a live webcam of a busy Manhattan intersection or a busy Los Angeles intersection. So they look at all the activity, look at where's the mass extinction, as if that has any relevance whatsoever, but making light of it even, as opposed to, you know, reporting seriously about it. So it's kind of, you know, it's unfortunate, but I hope, you know, that trend will change as people become more aware.
I think that it's not that they don't report about it, because really they do report about it, but it's just kind of not like their headline news. I think all of them report about it. Like I see, you know, this topic covered pretty much in all of the journals. Like if you look for it, you'll find that everyone talks about it. CNN talks about it. BBC talks about it a lot. I just think that, like with most environmental topics, sometimes it's just perhaps not as interesting to people, and so they don't make it their main feature. And that's just unfortunate, and that's, I think, more based on what people are interested in. You know, it's just that they're just not as interested, which is a mistake. Which is a gross mistake, because they don't understand how dependent we are on biodiversity. But I do see coverage of it. I just think that it just needs to be more prominent. I mean, I think it should be on the first page every day, you know, but but I think it's more of a lack of interest, in my opinion. That's just what I think.
Yeah, Bob and Sophia, you make great points. Very well said. And so after the opening segment, the film goes into what's actually causing this end game in 2050, and it's mainly animal agriculture, and how all this clearing of land for livestock feed and animal agriculture is causing deforestation on a mass scale, which is causing habitat destruction, loss of biodiversity, and mass extinctions. And you also mentioned in the film how, you know, animal agriculture is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector combined. So I thought that was very well done in the film, and I just wanted to give you, Sophia and Bob, the opportunity to just talk about that more and elaborate.
Can I actually jump into with a question we have from the audience that's a little bit relevant, I think, to what Brandon's saying? So this question is from Sean. Sean's a Humane Action Pittsburgh member, and he's also with the Pittsburgh Vegan Society. He says, hello, thank you for your perspectives and for the film. What has been the response by people who have experienced Endgame? And how do you perceive the connection between plant-based living and mental, emotional health? So in addition to Brandon's question, could you maybe also touch on Sean's?
Sure. Bob, do you wanna start, or why don't you go first?
Yeah, I was just kind of looking at the question. So the connection, I mean, I think you may have a good perspective on this. Mine is just more, you know, as far as like the connection between being plant-based, being vegan, and just kind of your frame of mind. I mean, I don't know if it's something that we've, you know, touch on directly in the film, but I think that's an important topic and an interesting one. I mean, I certainly kind of feel, you know, both a little bit more aware of a lot of issues that I wasn't aware of before. And I also feel kind of a little bit more at peace, even though I'm, you know, I feel much more, you know, aware of some existential problems that I wasn't, you know, familiar with, or didn't keep me up at night, you know, before I became aware of them. And so it's kind of a little bit of, with me, it's just personal. I don't know what the, you know, what it might be for everybody's experience, but it's been, you know, a double-edged sword, you know, where, you know, I feel at peace not contributing to intentional harming of animals. Certainly there's the moral dimension that's, I think, very important, and does give me some peace of mind. But there's also kind of the, you know, the horror of it all, that it's continuing. And then on top of it, becoming more aware with, you know, the work I've been doing with Sophia of the environmental impacts of just human activities overall, with animal agriculture kind of weighing front and center in almost all of those crises, and just kind of the concern that creates over, you know, what kind of future we're walking into. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's just kind of my personal kind of frame of mind thinking about it.
Sure. I think so. The question about the relationship between eating plant-based, you know, plant-based vegan and mental health. I think definitely. So from a physical perspective, from a medical perspective, definitely, because a plant-based diet is linked to a lower incidence of many chronic health problems. Just with that issue alone, I would think it would benefit psychologically, mentally, significantly, for people to feel empowered, like they can do something about their weight, their cancer risk, their heart disease risk. So from that perspective alone, I think it is very, very beneficial. You know, it's a big deal, the fact that the fact that it is that there's so much evidence that eating plant-based is so helpful for our physical health is definitely something that is not a small thing, you know. And so that is why actually in the film initially I wasn't going to include that last part about health and plant-based diets, because it was more of an environmental film. But I thought later, you know, like this is such an important issue and some people, they're not really cognizant of it, so we need to include it. Even if it's an environmental film, like it has to have this little segment about its impact on health. And so that was one question. And I think Brandon's question, Bob, was also the reaction to the film. And I can reply to that first, and then I'll pass it on to you if that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's been a very positive reaction. Like, I mean, I am very pleased. My number one fear when making this film was that nobody was gonna watch it, because it was such a like time-consuming and expensive thing to do. Like, I was like, please don't let nobody watch it. You know, please let people watch it. And so, you know, we are nobodies. You know, I'm a nobody. I'm nobody famous or anything. And so we put it on YouTube for free, and we put it on Amazon Prime and Tubi. It's on Tubi for free and Amazon Prime. And so right now on YouTube, I don't have the metrics for anything but YouTube, so I'm not able to give any insights as to the other platforms at this time. On YouTube, we have around 500,000 views, and I guess the reaction, one very surprising reaction that we've received that kind of startled me, that kind of rattled me, is we've had a lot of people like accusing us of all these like conspiracy theory related things. And that initially I was like, oh, this is so funny, like people accusing me of, and then I was like, well, it's not that funny anymore when you have like thousands of people these bizarre conspiracies about anything from like, oh, this is just environmental propaganda to control people, for the Bill Gates thing, about the elite, about drinking the blood from the kids that they harvest, like some bizarre. And so, but even though those are the comments that rattle me a lot, I mean, not rattle me, just kind of like surprised me, because I was just not expecting it. I think that the vast majority of the people who accept the science, or no, what do I want to say? I want to say, I think that even though those are the vast majority of comments on YouTube, where people are very chatty and very freely put their stuff in there, I think that's not the majority of the audience. We've had a lot of comments and a lot of messages and a lot of emails of people who have expressed that they found the movie very helpful and that they plan to make a lot of changes to their diet and their lifestyle. And that's you know, to me, like the best award, you know, just people saying that they're gonna use this information. Another thing is that we've received a lot of messages from people around the world saying that they wanted to translate the film to their language so they could share the film with people in, I think, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Hungary. And so we're immensely grateful for that. I mean, that was always the objective of this film, to spread awareness. And so I'm super grateful for that. As events like this panel, I'm very grateful for just having a discussion about it and helping raise awareness of the film and the topics that it covers. And go ahead, Bob. I've spoken.
Yeah, no, I mean, my reaction's the same. I mean, I think overall it's just really happy that the film's getting out there, and you know, kind of the concern, will anyone see it? And then, you know, being able, you know, to make it available, you know, on a platform like YouTube, you know, notwithstanding, you know, more than comfortable amount of insane comments from conspiracy theorists that the comment section on YouTube.
Even flat earth, people are angry at us sometimes because we depict a globe, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh,
No.
I bet you guys believe you live in a round earth."
We learned that.
You know, they think they live in a flat earth, and I was like,
comments.
I didn't even think those people existed that thought about.
Yeah, me neither.
But-
So that's been eye-opening in a way that we definitely did not anticipate or need. But there it is. But on balance, yeah, I mean, just the messages we've received and the number of views, and just kind of every now and then we'll just Google the film to see there's something random like that it's popped up somewhere in the discussion board or Reddit thing or something, and it's really nice to see that it's that the information is getting out there and it's generating discussion and thought and more awareness, and so it's been good. And I think Amazon, we don't have metrics, but I think we have something like 80 or 90 reviews. It'd be nice to know how many people have viewed it. Maybe we'll get that information someday, but it seems like it's getting some traction even there, which is not as open of a accessible platform. It's just people who have Prime subscriptions, but on YouTube and Tubi, it's free, and so I think that's been really helpful, and we've been real pleased.
And I think Brandon had another question before that, Bob. He was talking about the land use and the greenhouse gas emissions that we mentioned. And I mean, yeah, we kind of wanted to open the film, the first section, with mentioning about the land use and loss of biodiversity, just because it's so significant. And I mean, right now, more than 50% of the habitable land on the planet is used for livestock and their feed, for both livestock and the feed to feed them. And so, I mean, that is extremely significant. And the only good thing about that is that is something that we can change drastically if we change our diets. And so we did want to mention that. And of course, we also wanted to mention the fact that, some time ago, mentioned when we mentioned the impact on our planet, we also want to keep perspective. So it's the consumption that's causing an impact, and it's also the consumers, right? So one thing that I found very interesting that I guess we didn't include in the film is that around, before we started agriculture, before humanity started agriculture around 10, 11,000 years ago, the population of humans on the planet was 1 million, around 1 million humans in the entire planet. And so now we are growing by 1 million about every 5 days. And so that of course has an impact on the planet, everywhere. In my home country of Mexico, we're having a lot of deforestation, for example, due to avocado demand, which is a huge problem, but because animal agriculture disproportionately uses so many resources, we did want to spend a lot of time in emphasizing that and give it the time that it deserves, because it really is, even though all of the foods have a water impact, have a land impact, have a soil impact, everything uses resources. But animal agriculture does use it disproportionately. And so we did want to spend a lot of time in the film highlighting that and bringing attention to that.
Yeah, and Sophia, in fact, you guys had mentioned in the film how so inefficient producing animal foods is, and only 12% of those feed calories are actually part of the human diet. And so these animals are like middlemen. All the feed that we use to raise livestock could go directly to humans, and I like how you guys cover that. And then I also wanted to touch on not just animal agriculture, but the plastic pollution problem our planet is facing, which you guys, I thought, did so well in the film. Just a couple of key statistics that I wanted to share with everyone again. How you know, it's predicted that by 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish. There's 8 million tons of plastic being dumped into the ocean every year. And the North Pacific Gyre has 6 times more plastic than plankton, which was unbelievable to me to see that statistic. And you had also wanted to touch on the human health aspects in the film and how, I mean, we're overfishing as it is, but when we do eat sea creatures, humans, we're essentially eating plastic at this point. And you had also mentioned how plastic has the ability to cross cell membranes to affect organ functions. So, you know, it's a huge problem. And Natalie, you had written a question for Bob and Sophia about COVID-19 and plastic. You want to share that?
Yeah, so one of the campaigns that Humane Action Pittsburgh has is called No Plastic Please, where we basically ask people to reduce or eliminate their consumption of plastic by just saying no to 8 commonly single-use items like straws and cutlery and bags and things like that. And I feel like prior to COVID, our campaign was making a lot of traction, working with individuals and businesses and policymakers on looking for sustainable alternatives or, in best case scenario, reusables. But it seems like since COVID-19 has hit, the amount of plastic has just skyrocketed, even, you know, from what it was before, you know, especially takeout containers. And when you go to restaurants, even if you're dining in, they want to bring you a different single-use plastic cup for every drink. So I guess just given that, you know, what are the implications for your predictions in the film? Are we now expediting a lot of what you've predicted, or how do you feel like COVID-19 is affecting this problem?
Oh yeah, you know, the figures that we used in the film were actually extremely conservative. We're from a United Nations report that was, you know, something that was not very recent, but it's a report that has been kind of like recycled a lot through the years. But even that was probably not up to date. But you're right that right now with COVID-19, takeout is one thing that you mentioned, but also even, you know, we're using a lot more plastic and plastic related materials, kind of like to disinfect and for cleaning materials. We're using it for our personal protective equipment. You know, a lot of them have plastic. We're using them in the hospitals. I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of being hospitalized here in any hospital for any medical condition, but we use tons of plastic. And of course, right now, the more medical issues and the more disinfection concern, the more we use. Well, you know, the projections, and I don't think that we share, I guess we did share the projection about more plastic than fish in the ocean. And that's not even very hard to accomplish, because there's going to be so much fish that are going to be depleted that it would be pretty easy to have more plastic than fish. But the projections were already that our plastic production, and this is something that we didn't put in the film, but the projection was that our plastic production was gonna pretty much close to double by mid-century. And so with the COVID-19 and with us, you know, consuming so much more of it, I mean, it's just such a depressing issue that it's kind of hard to say anything about it. When you think about it, Natalie, right now, there's 93% of the seabirds, they have plastic in their stomachs. And all of the marine animals that are filter feeders that, like, you know, ingest water and then they filter it out and then they stay with the stuff that they filter, they're all just like the whales that we show in the film. I mean, they're dying with hundreds of pounds of plastic in their stomach. And just to think that that's increasing, that is, it's just hard. It's just hard to know what to say about it. It's just something that that we really need to address. Kind of, that's something that I think kind of needs to happen from the top down, Bob. Don't you agree? Like, we really just need to stop using plastic because it doesn't biodegrade and it doesn't even recycle easily. You know, this is like a concept that people have, like, oh, you just recycle it. Well, it doesn't always, and doesn't really, and only for a very limited amount of times and only for limited amount of products. So we've basically turned something that's extremely durable into something that we use as disposable. So it's a disaster. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's an environmental disaster. And yeah, Bob, do you want to say anything else?
I mean, I echo everything that you said, but just to kind of go back, I mean, I think we still should do everything we can from the bottom up, but recognizing that it's not a problem that's going to be solved from the top down. I mean, we really try to not use plastic in every aspect of what we do, and we still can't avoid some of it. I mean, it's just the packaging of a lot of things. Even if we don't, it's just one of my pet peeves is seeing somebody put bananas in a plastic bag at the grocery store. I mean, there's so much of it that's so easy to avoid. Like, bring your own silverware that you reuse when you're eating out. And bring your own bags, and don't put the bananas in a bag. Don't put anything in the bag if you don't have to.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating about plastic is that we trash the planet in such a short amount of time. I mean, plastic really wasn't widely used up until, even though it was like discovered in 1907, it really wasn't widely used until the middle of the century. So that's such a short amount of time that we kind of turn the planet into a trash bag, into a waste. And that by itself is something to reflect upon. Like how we take something so small, every single hiccup that we do is so large, that we have such a large impact, and that we turn something, every little mistake we do, into kind of like an environmental disaster. I mean, right now, if you measure pretty much every human all around the world, everybody has BPA, some level of BPA in their blood, and even a lot of the animals do. I mean, how is it that this thing wasn't even available like 100 years ago, and now all of the oceans, all the animals in the ocean are choking on it, all the filter feeders and that? So definitely something to reflect on and to try to vigorously, address as much as we can, and to do what we can about the situation. Yeah. Sorry for the long-winded reply.
No, that's great. Thank you. And Brandon, I think you had some more questions. If you want to go ahead.
I was actually going to turn it over to you. Sure, we all want to hear about the story of the white cow in the film. So Natalie, you had a great question.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's so tough to watch, I think, footage of any, what's going on behind the scenes at a farm. I think probably a lot of us on this call, that's probably the reason why we're vegan, is we at some point saw a video of what goes on behind the scenes. And so it's amazing to me that you were able to go to the slaughterhouse for 2 days and just witness what you witnessed. And I guess I'm just, how difficult was it for you to do that? I don't know that I could have done that.
Well, as difficult as it was, like, I hate to, it's almost like I hate to talk about any difficulty with that, even though it was very difficult, and but it's just like, I just think about what the animals there were going through, and it's just like any difficulty that I could have ever had just doesn't even compare to what those animals were going through. Like, and it was just this horrible sinking feeling in your stomach, everything about it. And maybe even more so the day before that, when I was in the holding areas, the fact that somehow, like, all of these animals, all of them knew that they were gonna get killed. I mean, they were so terrified of everyone there. They were like foaming at their mouth. Like, you could see, I mean, you can see their eyes, how terrified they are. Just like when you have a dog, you can see, like, if there's thunder and fireworks, how they're terrified. they were all like that. And, you know, it was just so, you know, it's almost like you don't have words to describe it. And the slaughter part itself, I think what was hardest about that was to see how all those animals, and I know I mentioned some of it in the film, how, and it's so obvious, you know, everybody would think about it. If somebody wants to kill you, you know, you would try to fight back. Nobody wants to die. And I think that in our minds, you know, when we ate meat, we kind of envisioned this kind of like process where there was super efficient, no pain, nothing, like this kind of turning into these nice little pieces of ham or whatever. But the reality is that it's almost like every single one of them is like a murder scene, like a murder incident, because of how they all fight back, how they all resist. And the worst part of it, to me, and I still get shaky talking about it, I'm sorry, my hands. The worst part of it is how they look around for help. Like, you can see them, they look around for help. They look at the person who's slaughtering them. They look at them for help. And then you see them, like in their eyes, they just kind of give up, you know, because you see that they know that they're just getting slaughtered, you know. And I don't know, it was very difficult. And for some time, I couldn't even talk about it, because it was like I couldn't even talk about a cow or anything, because I would just start crying for a period of time. And then there's sanctuary with cows. They like invited me to give a speech, and I talked there. And then I don't know, I became a little bit, I could at least talk about it, because initially, like right after that, like I just couldn't even, like I couldn't even talk about it, because I would just break down. But anyway, there's nothing that compares to what goes on there. Any amount of discomfort that anyone can experience when witnessing something like that can't even compare with what the animals go through. And that's why that was one of the motivations for making the film. When I went there, I didn't have the film in mind. I thought I was gonna do like some kind of resource of information, and that I was gonna put the footage there, and that it was some kind of a like online resource. And just seeing what the animals go through was one of the motivations for me to try to do something what in my power was as effective. You know, I'm just a nobody, you know, but I thought, well, I have to, you know, put whatever my brain can do and whatever my resources can give me to put the most compelling information available, so that to try to end this situation, this horror show that is happening in these places. And yeah, and one disturbing thing is that, you know, the animal production is going up every year, and that's just something that's very troubling to me. But so the answer to your question is that's one of the motivations of why I do what I do, just that experience and just seeing what the animals go through.
Of course, yeah. Sofia is such a touching story. Can't imagine how you felt. And at least I could tell how you just poured your heart and soul into trying to tell your story and your experience with that. So that's amazing. And you know, even if we tell people these stories, why do you feel people are so reluctant to make changes in their diet and lifestyle? I mean, given the horrors of this, and given the stakes and the impact on our planet.
I think that a big part of it is that people just don't want to be inconvenienced, and we're just kind of you know, we evolved from these primate species that are very, you know, kind of short-sighted, very emotionally driven, this here and now. And and another, I think, big part of it that we sometimes underestimate is that people genuinely think that they're gonna harm their health if they go vegan. Unfortunately, even though that's not the case, there's still a lot of misinformation with that. But with regards to understanding the impact it has on the environment and not making the changes, I think that they think, well, as long as it doesn't affect me. I have family members who tell me that, like, oh, it won't affect me and I don't have any kids, so whatever, let the world go to hell and I don't care. You know, family members who are educated, who went to school, who have the means to change their diet, but they just but I think it also comes down to them not understanding that it will affect them, that it will affect us all, you know, that these changes are already underway. And you know what? Pandemics are one part of it. And, you know, let me ask you, I mean, did it affect you? Yes, it's affecting all of us. It's crashing economies. It's crashing, you know, the way that we interact as society. And one of the main reasons why pandemics come about is because our intrusion into nature, is because we are going into forests at a rate of, you know, according to the WWF, it's like at a rate of like 1 football field every 2 seconds, which is ridiculous if you think about it. You know, every 2 seconds to level that amount of forest. But and that intrusion into wildlife is having consequences, and it will have consequences, and it already has consequences. And it is my perspective that, you know, just the pandemic that we're going through right now is one of those consequences of intruding with wildlife, of interacting in this unusual thing with wildlife trade, with deforestation. And so I think that if they understood, and that's why I try to impress that upon the film, if they understood that it does affect them, that it's just not to be nice with the wild animals and the rhinos, and no, that it does affect them personally, their life and their kids, I think that it would be different. And that is why the film kind of tried to impress that upon them.
Very well said. Natalie, did you want to go ahead? I think you had one more question, and then we definitely want to open it up to Q&A.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, a lot of people on this, in this webinar, I believe are already plant-based. So what are the #1 actions people who already eat a plant-based diet can take to further, you know, help solve this problem or help mitigate some of the damage at least? What else can we do?
Well, according to the research, when they put it in perspective of all, you know, all the actions that people can take and their impact in reducing their carbon emissions and their general environmental footprint, the most important ones that I've seen are, of course, you know, the plant-based diet is very significant. The way that they phrase another one is having one less child is also something that objectively, measurably has an impact in decreasing your carbon legacy, your plastic legacy, your water legacy. And legacy, the way that the researchers refer to that term, they refer to not only like, will you have an impact, but they count like, you know, the legacy of, you know, your children, your grandchildren, all of that. Of course, you know, there's a lot of assumptions in that, but another big one. So I think, you know, having small families is a big thing that people can take to reduce the footprint, the general footprint of that humans are having on the planet. I think another big one is not flying, or I mean, not flying as much. You know, we never give any thought to it. And honestly, I think that because it's so impractical, like if I want to go to Sweden, like if I try to be like Greta style and like sail there, like it would be so impractical. I think that's something that probably people, if they have the means, they would probably not do that as much. So the ones that I favor the most are, you know, going plant-based and considering the impact, you know, on your family size, and, you know, consider small families, consider adoption as well. I think those are the most to my understanding, those are the most impactful. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, no, I think all of those, as far as what you can do in your personal life. I would also say, a civic responsibility. It's that time, vote, and politicians need to be held accountable and need to accept the science and the seriousness of the science. And I don't want to get too specific, but I don't think it's anything that's not abundantly obvious in this election cycle how important it is to vote, but also just even when it's not an election year, and just being civically minded and raising awareness and educating yourself and educating other people, staying abreast of what the studies are saying, what the news is on these important environmental topics, and putting pressure. Because some of these things, we have to take, I think, individual responsibility in our lives, but some of these things also require, like, Sophia was referring to earlier with like plastic, for example. I think in the end, it's got to be a top-down, very significant component to solving that issue. I mean, we have to stop producing plastic for every little thing. We have to find a different way of packaging, and then just it's so integrated in so many different steps in our economic activity that it's got to change. And that doesn't change. I mean, it's kind of two sides of the same coin. You're not going to have that kind of pressure on companies and politicians unless you have an educated population to which they are accountable and to which they respond economically when it comes to corporations as well. When you choose one product over another, if you can find some whatever it is, a toothbrush or anything else that you buy periodically that's made of something other than plastic, and vote with your dollars too. That does have an impact. If you have an increased awareness and accountability in your own activities and things that you have that are within your control, the more and more people that make those decisions, it does make a difference. So I think that would be my.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Sophia.
Another thing that I didn't mention that is super important that I mentioned in the film, but it seems kind of vague, but it is important to promoting gender equality and women's rights around the world. I know it seems vague, so that's why I put in the film, do what you can to do that. But it is actually something that would make oh, hello? Is this okay? Can I continue?
I think you're good.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's something that would make a profound difference, a true gender equality, in particular with regards to with the population growth we were having. That is very significant, because that would go against what we're seeing right now, like a lot of child marriages and situations like that, which are obviously horrific, and on a humanitarian level, and even on an environmental level, like it also happens to be an effective intervention that we can take to help curb our dramatic population growth that we're having.
That's very informative answers from both of you, Sophia and Bob. Thank you. Natalie, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think we can start the Q&A.
Yeah, so we have about 5 minutes left, and we have a couple of questions if you guys can maybe just quickly touch on them. We have one from Amy. She asked, what do you think about California's proposed ban on gas vehicles by 2035? Is it too little too late, or part of a growing trend? And then also, if maybe you guys could just share if there's anything positive going on, or can you maybe share some good news for us to end on?
I know, sorry, we're so like downers, right? Everything we have is just like disaster. So on the California proposition, I think obviously everything everything in the direction of moving away from fossil fuels is beneficial, obviously. Obviously, I think that the scale of the amount of CO2 that we have in the environment, and more so the scale of the energy that we as a civilization are utilizing, is gonna need much more dramatic interventions if we're serious about being like carbon neutral by the year 2050. Like, we're nowhere on track to do that, and that intervention would not get us, I mean, it would maybe get us a little bit closer, but not nearly enough. So but of course, you know, anything in that direction is helpful, but it just highlights the fact that you know, that this is a very complex problem, and part of it is that we are using a lot of energy, and we use it for everything, and we've gotten very used to doing it, and it's kind of complex to transition to clean renewable energy. And we need to do it, but I realize that it's challenging to move completely to that, but we need to do that. And go ahead, Bob, why don't you do that while see your thoughts and while I think of something positive.
Something positive. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, we do need to push. I mean, it's kind of part of the top down and the, you know, kind of the civic dimension of this, as far as like what we can do to, you know, promote, you know, from both our government and from companies, you know, a push for as fast as we can transition away from fossil fuels. The you know, the harsh reality is, like Sofia said, you know, based on at least the technologies and foreseeable ones, we're not on track to hit net carbon, you know, zero by mid-century. And, you know, that just underscores the importance of the other side of that coin, the things that we can do in our individual lives. I mean, you know, the fact that, you know, you can change your diet, and if we all did, one, it would reduce an enormous amount of greenhouse gases, not just CO2, but, you know, methane and nitrous oxide and greenhouse gases that are many times more powerful than CO2. And that's why kind of the CO2 equivalency is measured, you know, as far as what is attributable to the livestock sector as such a high percentage. And we could literally get rid of it if people adopted, everyone that has, you know, autonomy and can choose what they eat when you go to the grocery store or restaurant, which is virtually all of us. If you just change your diet and everyone did that, you know, one, it would reduce virtually immediately an enormous amount of greenhouse gases, including some of the most powerful, you know, gases at trapping heat in our atmosphere, like methane. But also, like we mentioned in the film, given the land footprint of animal agriculture, it would free up a lot of land that would no longer be needed for agricultural purposes. You'd be able to rewild it. One of the studies that we referenced towards the credits at the end of the film was a study from scientists at Oxford that calculated if we, you know, if we ditched meat and dairy worldwide, we could still feed our population, and we could reduce the amount of lands under cultivation by more than 75%, which is an area of land the equivalent of the United States, EU, China, and Australia combined. So if you think about, you know, all of, you know, one, reducing the amount of CO2 just through that personal action, if mass adopted, and two, you know, being able to reforest and rewild a lot of land that is important for carbon sequestration, as well as all these other issues that are interrelated, such as biodiversity and starting to, you know, restore habitats that other species rely on. I mean, it's something. So while we're pushing, so I guess, you know, it's a long-winded answer to, you know, the question. We do need to push for these new technologies, and we need to push on them like our lives depend on it. But at the same time, we shouldn't rely on that. We have to, I think, take these other actions that are available to us in our personal lives as well.
So you stole my positive thing I was gonna use that hypothetical as a positive. So the positive thing that I can think of right now, because I mean, we're in a deep trouble, you know. It's a very precarious situation and it's not getting better, you know. Animal foods are increasing, the production of it is actually increasing every year, and that's immensely problematic for everything. But the positive thing that I want to highlight is that, like Bob said, um, research shows that if we transition to a plant-based vegan diet, we could eliminate the need for farm use for 75% of our land. And that is something that we can do without any new technologies or investments or anything. And that's something that would be healthy and beneficial. So I guess the very positive thing is that people like Natalie Ahwesh and Brandon Boer are doing activism to get that accomplished. So I think that's a very positive thing, and that we need to just really do it very, very vigorously. So thank you guys for everything you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
So well.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the attendees?
Well, I think we're just about out of time, and I think we got to most of them.
All right.
Wonderful.
So
Great.
Okay. So thank you so much, and to Sophia and Bob, and thank you to everybody for coming. And this recording will be available, so if you want to share it with any of your friends, family on social media, you can look for it definitely on the Humane Action Pittsburgh Facebook page and website, and I can definitely email it to Brandon, Sophia, and Bob as well, and you guys can share it in your groups as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone who's on the who's watching, and yeah, thank you guys all.
All right, thank you. Bye guys.
Good night.
Bye-bye.